Welcome to the debate. Today we're looking at something that feels, well, almost culturally sacred. This idea that the early bird gets the worm. It's a maxim that suggests achievement is, fundamentally tied to waking up early. But that idea really clashes with what we now know about biology and, frankly, the way modern work is structured. So the central question we really have to get clear on is this: is waking up early, and let's be specific, we're talking before 6 a.m., is it truly a necessary foundation for success in today's world? I'm going to argue that yes, it is. That early rising is a non-negotiable requirement for building discipline, for productivity, and for getting a critical competitive edge.
And I'm coming at this from a completely different angle. I'll be arguing that the idea of necessity is just, well, it's false. Success is measured by your impact, by your output. And that makes the hour you wake up pretty much irrelevant compared to the things that actually matter: your own biology, flexibility, and the absolute priority of getting deep, restorative sleep.
Okay, so my core argument is that early rising achieves two things that later hours just fundamentally cannot. It instills this unwavering discipline, and it guarantees you access to distraction-free time. And this isn't just a preference, right? It's a systematic way to build a foundation. Those early hours, they offer a period of unparalleled quiet. It's free from the emails, the notifications, the digital noise that just defines the rest of the day. And that protected block of time is absolutely essential for deep work. The complex thinking, the strategic planning, the things that really drive achievement. And beyond that, there's the competitive edge, which I think is undeniable. I mean, if you are consistently awake and focused before your competitors, globally or just in the next office, you gain a significant head start. This gives you time for deliberate practice, for learning new skills, or for planning that is just too difficult to pull off in the chaos of a normal 9 to 5. And by starting the day with that momentum, you're also setting off a cascade of other positive habits, like exercise or good breakfast, which just leads to better decision-making and resilience all day long.
The critical variable here. I mean, if we define success by output and impact, then the timing of that output becomes secondary to its quality. And our first consideration has to be biological diversity. We know that people have distinct chronotypes. You're either a morning lark or an evening owl, genetically. So forcing a natural night owl into a rigid early schedule isn't promoting discipline. It's just generating chronic sleep deprivation. And that actively undermines success. It impairs memory, cognitive function, emotional stability, everything you need to succeed. We also have to face the reality of modern work. I mean, work is globalized, it's often remote, it favors flexibility, adaptability. Success today often relies on asynchronous communication, on managing teams across different time zones.
To say that waking up early is a necessity just ignores the fact that a high-performing global team succeeds by letting people work in their own optimal energy windows, not by forcing everyone to punch in at 6 a.m. The real foundation, and this is backed by decades of sleep science, is prioritizing the quality and duration of your sleep so you can maximize your brain function regardless of when the sun comes up. And let's just dig a little deeper into that biological reality first, because I think it's the strongest argument against this idea of necessity. As I said, if you impose an early schedule, say 5:30 a.m., on someone whose body is naturally producing melatonin until 7 a.m., you are forcing them to fight a fundamental biological process. They are waking up in a state of high sleep inertia.
Okay, I see why you think that, I really do. But let me give you a different perspective on that mechanism. While I fully respect the science of chronotypes and circadian rhythms, I think we have to be careful not to frame them as some immutable biological destiny, especially when we're talking about professional ambition. I mean, success often demands structure, adhering to deadlines, to client schedules, to market hours. If we just say early waking is impossible for half the population, we're really undermining the power of learned behavior.
But you're trading actual performance for the perception of discipline. When a night owl is forced awake early, they spend their most valuable morning hours with suboptimal brain function. The science is very clear on this. Performance on complex analytical tasks is significantly impaired when you're operating against your chronotype. So how can something that guarantees a cognitive decline be labeled a necessary foundation for success?
That's a powerful point about the biological cost. But I want to push back on the idea that this is totally rigid. We aren't talking about ignoring biology, we're talking about adjusting it. I mean, research into managing chronotypes shows that consistency, a consistent wake-up time, carefully controlled light exposure first thing in the morning, it can substantially, if slowly, shift the timing of your cortisol and melatonin peaks. And isn't the discipline it takes to do that consistently? Isn't that precisely the kind of discipline we're arguing is necessary for success anyway?
Sure, discipline is key, but discipline should be applied to optimizing your performance, not fighting your own body just to hit an arbitrary time. If I'm an owl and I do my best deep work between 8 p.m. and midnight, and I protect that window of time, why is forcing myself to wake up at 5 a.m. to do low-quality, foggy work somehow better? The cost, that chronic sleep debt, it eventually catches up. It leads to burnout, to poor decision-making.
But we can't just dismiss the empirical evidence here. I mean, look at the real-world data. An overwhelming majority of leaders in highly competitive fields, finance, tech founders, you name it, they consistently cite early rising as a key part of their success. They talk about that quiet time being critical for strategy, not just for clearing their inbox. They aren't just saying it's a correlation, they are attributing causation in their own personal frameworks.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it very differently. I'm sorry, but I just don't think the wake-up time itself is the main causal factor. It's a nice story, but these are highly disciplined people to begin with. What enabled their success wasn't the specific hour they started work, but the intense focus they applied to a protected block of time. If they had applied that same iron-willed discipline to a block of time from, say, 1 p.m. to 9 p.m., the output would likely be the same, or maybe even better if it aligned with their natural energy peak.
But that assumes the environment is the same at 1 p.m. My whole argument for necessity hinges on the fact that it's not. The early morning is the only reliably protected time. When a CEO starts their day at 9 a.m., they're instantly swamped with staff requests, with market news, with emails. They're immediately managing chaos. The 5 a.m. block is non-negotiable for them because it is fundamentally isolated from all the managerial and communication overhead that eats up the rest of the day.
I find that whole line of reasoning, that focus time is only available before 6 a.m., to be more of a failure of personal boundary setting than anything else. I mean, if you can't enforce a block of focused work time later in the day, that suggests a lack of discipline in managing your own schedule, not the necessity of an early alarm. Successful remote companies do this all the time. They thrive by creating focus blocks and using tools that signal to the team, do not interrupt, regardless of the hour.
I understand the flexibility argument, I do, but I'm still not convinced that a self-imposed focus block is as powerful as a structurally, environmentally enforced one. There's a real psychological advantage to beating the alarm clock and starting your day before the world starts demanding things from you. That act of discipline sets a tone for the entire day.
And that mandatory act, if it goes against your biology, guarantees that the tone you're setting is one of fatigue and cognitive depletion. We need to optimize for output, not for a time slot. High-quality focused work done at any time is better than unfocused, sleep-deprived work done just for the sake of starting early. Necessity implies there's no other way, and modern work proves that other, more flexible ways absolutely exist.
I still have to reaffirm the concept of advantage, though. While, yes, you can achieve success on a flexible schedule, the person who builds in that early structure has a significant compounding advantage over time. They've built more discipline, they've banked more hours of deep work, and they're generally seen as more reliable in traditional business structures. This is especially true in roles where being proactive, being first to act is critical.
They're still not accounting for the performance cost. The night owl who's doing deep work at 9 p.m. after getting a full night's sleep is operating at a much higher cognitive level than the person who forced themselves awake at 5:30 a.m. and is now running on a sleep deficit. If the habit degrades performance and causes chronic sleep debt for a huge portion of the population, it cannot be called necessary for success. It's actively counterproductive. Look, I think we can both agree that quality work and adequate sleep are the absolute non-negotiables, regardless of the time of day. Where we really diverge is on the timing. I maintain that any definition of success has to prioritize our biological reality. Forcing this old school framework on everyone just ignores our natural limitations, and in the end, it results in lower performance overall. The true metric is impact, and impact comes from a rested, sharp mind, not from just punching a clock.
And I would argue, conversely, that the traditional emphasis on morning discipline is still incredibly valuable, and yes, necessary for reaching the highest levels of achievement. Early rising is simply the clearest, most reliable path to building that essential discipline, to securing a structural advantage, and to establishing the positive habits you need for sustained, high-level success. It's a structure that inherently protects deep focus in a world that is always defaulting to distraction.
I think this debate has really highlighted the core tension of the modern professional world. It's this conflict between the traditional framework that values rigid morning discipline and the growing science-backed recognition of individual biology and the opportunities of flexible work.
Exactly. And ultimately, the listener has to weigh the evidence for themselves. Is this really a necessity for everyone, a structural requirement for success, or is it just a highly beneficial preference for a certain type of person in a certain type of field? The evidence suggests that while it can be a powerful mechanism for success for some, calling it a necessity for all remains a point of deep intellectual challenge.